Hello, welcome on TECS Lens, Emerging Founders. Welcome everyone. Welcome Andre. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Andre Silva is the co-founder of Quartz. And Andre, before we start our discussion, where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining you from Porto, my hometown. I'm actually here for a few days for personal reasons, and then flying back to London tomorrow, actually, where our headquarters is based.
Fine. And enjoy nice Portugal.
Thank you.
Before we dive into Quartz, tell us one thing about yourself most people wouldn't expect. Something that shaped you, how you think as a builder, as a founder.
Yeah. Um, Look, I mean, my prior experience at Revolut, obviously, I think was a masterclass in terms of thinking um, about like problem solving and being a founder. But I would say something more unexpected that people wouldn't know is probably the point of being a musician. I've always kind of played the guitar and kind of composed music from a young age, and um, and I think music is always about like, finding elegant solutions to like melodies and harmonies and rhythms, and I think it's shaped a lot on how I think about life and business in kind of a slightly different way. So I would say that's kind of the unexpected part that probably shaped me a lot on how I think about things.
Do you think that are there any similarities between this kind of art and founding a startup?
Yeah, I would say so. Look, I mean, couple of things. First, I mean, music is quite mathematical when you think of it, like, and how we kind of resolve some of like the chord patterns and all of that. So I think I mean, obviously there's like a big creative and kind of artistic component, but it's also quite analytical in how you think about melodies, but also, for example, rhythm, right? You usually define rhythm in terms of numbers. So it's yeah, it's fairly mathematical in that aspect. And then from my personal standpoint, because I had a band and there's also kind of the human component to it in terms of how we coordinate everyone and everyone has their own personal taste. And it's also because it's art and everyone kind of maybe prefers something to the other and you can get subjective how you manage all of that. I mean, there's a bit of a leadership component there as well, which I think I've kind of acknowledged from a young age.
Fantastic. When did you realize wealth management needed to be reimagined?
Yeah. Look, I think there's two components to it. One is more structural, and the second is a bit more tactical, which I think answers a bit more the why now. But from a structural standpoint, look, I mean, it's something that's been in my head, I think, since the very early days when I've started studying economics and when in my bachelor in Porto. Um, there's a couple of things that I realized. I mean, one is wealth management was always perceived and still very much is as kind of a rich person's luxury to some extent. And it really shouldn't, right? Because it's just such a key part of everyone's lives. I mean, even if you think about kind of the basic equation of saving towards retirement, right, which is obviously something that everyone should think about to some extent. Um, Wealth management and how you invest is such a key part of that. And I've always found it quite intriguing that a lot of the conversation around that is how much you save, and maybe you just don't go have dinner or lunch out because you can save more at the end of the month and all of that. And that's very important, how much you save. But how you invest it and how you manage what you save is actually a lot more important, right? Because again, if you think about it in mathematical terms, how much you save will kind of be the slope of the curve. But how you invest can make the shape of the curve quite different and a lot more exponential, right? And so it's arguably more important. And I've always found it fairly intriguing that that it wasn't such a core part of the conversation to some extent. I mean, usually the conversation is a lot more focused on how much you save, especially I would say among the lower and middle classes. And so that's something that I've always found like intriguing and also kind of a big problem. I thought, okay, if someone could change that a bit, it would improve outcomes for everyone and it would be ultimately, from a societal standpoint, like a net positive. And then from a tactical standpoint, I think when I left Revolut last December and I found myself with a bit more time in my hands to actively manage my wealth and to think through some of those points for myself personally, I I realized like why like that really did nothing existed that allowed me and kind of gave me the support I needed to do that while I'm focused maybe 12 hours a day on something else, right? And so I thought like someone should make this up, right? Someone should kind of create this platform that enables the normal person um, to kind of effectively manage their wealth and to really kind of effectively know they're investing their wealth, how they're managing their tax and all that. without having an excessive burden in terms of entry point, right? Because obviously those solutions exist, private banks, even independent financial advisors, but they tend to have a fairly high entry point, and the ones that have a lower entry point tend to be fairly generic and not very much value added, right? So I think that was kind of the tactical trigger to just get myself into this with my co-founder and then start to build Quartz.
And what moment made you think advice should adapt to people, not the other way around?
Yeah. Look, maybe taking a step back. I mean, the way I think about advice, and it's obviously something that that is on my mind a lot, especially these days, is kind of a function of three things. One is knowing the other person uh, very clearly, right? I mean, knowing, for example, that you, Antonis, might want to buy a house next year, knowing that you might be married with kids, which obviously might change the way you think about finances. But even maybe going further down and knowing kind of how you think about things will help me advise you better, right? Because I mean, money is very much kind of an intimate thing for everyone, right? So almost being almost kind of a therapist and having like this incredible knowledge of the person that's in front of you is a really important factor, right? So that's factor number one. Factor number two that also affects the equation is knowledge of the markets, external events. What else, right? I mean, everything that's happening outside. Obviously, without that, you're not able to provide good advice. And then point number three is how you kind of match these two, right? You match the person with what's happening outside, and we call it delivery, right? Is how you deliver the message, how compelling it is, but also like in terms of empathy and whatnot. And so these three are really important, right? And obviously, I mean, I think that's actually the main reason why the industry is very much still human based and human centric, and it's very much face to face and very relationship driven. Is because machines might be incredible at doing point number two, like knowledge of markets and external events, right? They don't sleep, they don't get hangover and whatnot. So they conceptually they can be a lot better than a human at doing that. But they're still worse, I would say, in point number one, in terms of getting to know the other person. Although I think that can be changing with generative AI. And they're definitely a lot worse in terms of delivery, right? You don't go golfing out with a with a machine. But independent of that, I think again, when you think about advice in these three components, you understand like adapting to the person is just a key thing, right? Because everyone can build something that has intimate knowledge of markets and external events, but it's how you kind of personalize it to the person that really kind of creates excellent advice. And also, it's why the industry is still very much largely human centric.
You do have a very good, a deep understanding of your customers, what you're trying to solve. What does financial confidence, what does making financial confidence accessible matter to you personally?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think since I'm young, I mean, I've always been kind of a big believer in meritocracy and kind of as an idea of fairness to some extent. Like people having good control over their destiny, equality of opportunity rather than more kind of equality of starting point. I mean, I've always seen kind of as a very honorable pursuit to some extent, creating this kind of fairness in meritocracy. And I guess as I kind of started to grow older, I got quite fascinated with the idea of like, which I think is even exposed in this book by Nassim Nicholas Taleb called Skin in the Game, of social mobility being not just about people moving up, but also dynamic equality, right? So people being able to move down as well, not being insulated from falling, right? Something that you see, for example, in other societies in Europe. I mean, there's a preeminent high class, which tends to be thin at times from a percentual standpoint, but they tend to be quite static, right? It's the same families because again, there's no big dynamic equality to some extent. There's other societies where we see that more. And as I see that very much kind of as an idea of kind of fairness to some extent. A key point that affects this is information asymmetry, right? I mean, when one party and one kind of group of people has more information than the other, they create a state of unfairness, right? And they kind of even shift risk from one perspective because the informed party can benefit from the less informed party, right? Which ends up bearing the consequences as well. So solving this information asymmetry, even without touching any kind of point around like access to investments and whatnot, to my mind, creates kind of a fair society. Society has like a net benefit as well, a positive net benefit on society, and so I think it's quite a honorable pursuit. Also, we believe it's a great business opportunity So kind of marrying both really led to us starting Quartz.
So pairing a mission of high impact with an opportunity, a business opportunity.
Yep.
Yes, fine. What was the first big step that turned Quartz from your initial approach, your initial idea, to a company?
Yeah. Look, I'm a big believer in doing and executing, right? So rather than, to be honest, once I've left Revolut last December, which was the first step. The first step, yeah, maybe taking a step back. The first step was going all in. I'm not very much a 50-50 kind of person. If I'm getting into something, I'm usually fairly or quite all in. And so the first step was quitting and just kind of getting all of my mental capacity there. The second step was really starting to kind of tick off some of the items. And if there's anything, any advice I can give to people, or I'm qualified to give to people, is really just about executing and start doing, right? A lot of people tend to spend a lot of time talking about ideas and discussing the merits or demerits of ideas. But a lot of times it's easier to kind of try it out, right, and see if it works or not. And even in terms of time to value, in terms of understanding whether it works or not, you might take a lot less time just trying to do it and just discussing the merits or demerits of the idea. So rather than spending a lot of time discussing that, I think I've just started very quickly kind of incorporating the company, talking to users, buying the domain, yeah, and just kind of got it off with. And eventually, like, we looked back and there was just a kind of whole block of things that already had ticked off, and the company was undergoing. So I think that was kind of the first initial set of steps that we took to build Quartz.
And how did it feel presenting a wealth platform powered by personal intelligence to early users, even
Yeah.
investors?
Yeah, it was interesting, right? I mean, but I will probably split the two groups because I think they're fairly different in the way they reacted to this, but also, I mean, to their knowledge of the industry and some of the dynamics, right? I mean, from an investor standpoint, I mean, it's always interesting to pitch an investor platform to some extent to investors, right? You kind of pitching to the user almost, and also because it's their profession and they're professional investors, they tend to have strong feelings about something that's very keen and kind of quite close to them, right? So it's always an interesting um, thing to do, and something that I realized once I started doing. It's not something that I thought a lot about it before. But look, it was quite clear from the get-go that everyone recognized the need and the market opportunity. Um, it was also very clear on the negative side that everyone was fairly afraid of, like, distribution capabilities versus incumbents. There's not a lot of wealth platforms. I mean, there's a few, but mainly on the access piece and kind of getting access to new investors. But there's a lot of like wealth platforms that have really been able to capture kind of the wealthier investors. So distribution was always kind of a key point. How do you beat that? Because there's not an historical track record of doing that. But I think it was about like talking to the other side, to the users. That really gave us the confidence that, especially earlier users, so people, younger users, so people that are between the 20 something to the 40 something, just see wealth management very differently. They're also very well positioned to avail from a huge wealth transfer coming from older investors and kind of older generations to them. And we do believe they will inevitably search for different solutions. And we got that in every single conversation we had. And I think that gave us the confidence as well to kind of take the leap.
What did your first user tests teach you about what people truly want from a digital wealth management?
Yeah. So we're currently not live with the product. I mean, obviously we've tested a bit with some of the initial kind of the development app that we currently are testing, and we're very close as well to start rolling out a bit more extensively to friends and family. But an interesting tool that we have is if you join the waitlist, and if you haven't, I'll definitely would invite you to. You can actually share with our AI agent your concerns around like managing your wealth, and you can have an interaction a bit and kind of support us in building the product, right? Ultimately, we want to talk to our users, and since we're an AI company, we've kind of created this AI experience to do so. And we've seen a lot of, I mean, actually, we've been quite surprised, to be honest, by the depth of some conversations. Obviously, you have a couple of conversations, just like two or three messages back and forth, fairly short ones. But we have had a few that are very lengthy ones with kind of properly well thought of answers, which have been really valuable, I would say, in how we think about structuring the product. And in terms of those, I think there's a couple of topics that have came. They were really kind of top of mind for everyone. One was people don't want a fragmented experience; they want to have everything in one place. I don't think any user, I mean, most users have mentioned that, and most people we've talked with, we haven't found anyone that disagrees and says, no, I would love to have everything split in different apps, right? So people want to see their wealth in one place. They want to understand their performance. And the only way to do that is to see everything in one place. People also want someone to bounce their ideas with and kind of pressure test their portfolio. And again, this is something that obviously if you are very wealthy, you might have in your private banker, in your advisor. But it is a luxury and not something that most people do. Even if you're wealthy enough to probably have a private banker or a financial advisor, you might be on kind of the smaller segment that gets more of a generic support. And so creating this and creating someone that's creating this AI agent that's tireless and that is has 24/7 ability to listen to you and to provide you kind of this tireless support is something that most people that I've shared would really find value with. And also have like a non-judgmental trade-off, right? They can bounce their crazy ideas with and they can get feedback. And that's something that people have kind of raised to us that would be really valuable. And then third point, although it's not something that we're working actively towards right now, it has become clear as well that access to investments, mainly private markets, is still largely unsolved, right? I mean, there's been a huge wave of fintech solving access to equities, for example, US equities mainly being kind of the big piece, access to ETFs, and there's been kind of a massive drop in costs in terms of fees and whatnot. But there's certain asset classes, private markets being one that we see referred to a lot, but also I would say, for example, fixed income as well is a huge class that has been probably forgotten slightly by some of the digital players and kind of the newer fintechs. Is still largely unsolved, and it's something that we find really interesting as well as a potential development.
And looking at your product today, what aspect excites you most? The personalized insights, the unified dashboard, or the human-like interaction? And why is now the right time for Quartz?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of measuring things and putting things into like a mathematical perspective, as I guess probably has come across already in the conversation. Because I think without measuring, and if you don't know where you stand, like you cannot improve, right? Recently, I got into using Whoop as a wearable kind of health tracker. So yeah, I'm kind of a big fan of that. And honestly, it's probably one of the most simple aspects of Quartz, but it's one of the ones that excites me the most. Is this ability to really measure how are you doing in terms of managing your wealth, right? Which might seem like a really simple question because money and wealth is quite a measurable thing if you're just focusing on financial wealth. But most people wouldn't be able to answer the question like, what is your analyzed rate of return this year, right? And how does that compare with whatever benchmark you think might be a good benchmark for kind of investments you might have, right? Most people kind of don't think in that frame, and even if they do, like it's actually incredibly hard to kind of get to the right number. And that excites me, right? Kind of having an incredible aggregation product that allows you to aggregate everything in one place and being able to really accurately measure how well you're doing, and also compare that to benchmarks, so you know, okay, actually, I would be better off just putting things in the S&P and being passive because I could get the same return with the same level of risk. I think it's a really interesting and important perspective, right? And one that I think is missing. So I'm excited about that, and that's kind of more the core fundamental part of the product. Because without knowing where you stand, there's no way you can improve, and advice comes after that, right? Before advice, there needs to be like a deep understanding of where you stand. So I think I'm excited about the boring part of the product, but I do really think that core piece is just a fundamental cornerstone for us to be able to provide advice, and it's definitely where we're spending most of the time, right? It's about getting kind of that quality cornerstone so that we can be the best at providing advice and eventually matching investments with the right investors.
Andre, how did you meet your co-founders, and what convinced you to team up?
Yeah. So we're two co-founders. Right now it's myself and Mateusz. Mateusz is a lifelong friend. I think I've known him since I'm like 3 years old or something.
Mhm.
So that was the first time we met. And eventually we went to school together. We met again in our doing our bachelor in economics in Porto, and I think we remained friends throughout. So it's been 30 years of friendship. And look, I guess, yeah, for a while now. I mean, while I was working at Revolut, Matheus was working at N26, which is also a competing digital bank. Um, and I think for a while, it's kind of been every time we meet up, usually when we come back to Porto around Christmas or whatnot, like there's always a conversation around we should do something together. Um, and um, and I think last year, I mean, there were a couple of tactical things that happened, potentially especially on my side, but also kind of in general in the world that have prompted us to kind of take the leap. One was, I mean, obviously Revolut's secondary sale and all of that. I mean, does gave us kind of a different ability to take the leap. So that was point number one. I think it freed up some liquidity and capital for a lot of us, myself, and a lot of my colleagues at Revolut to potentially start their own companies. Second was everything that was happening with generative AI, right? I mean, it does shift what's possible in terms of technology, and it's such a nascent field that I think, well, I mean, a builder at heart will always dream, okay, what's possible with this? And I think that also kind of really sparked something in us about kind of taking the leap. We thought, okay, this is a really interesting point in time to start building. So yeah, I think those two things got together, and just the fact that we've known each other for years. I mean, we have a lot of trust in each other, and also a very kind of complementary skill set, while both having deep knowledge in terms of fintech. So we thought, why not? There won't be a better time to do this. So we just took the leap there.
And what's one thing your co-founder does that you deeply admire?
Yeah. Resilience. I think that's the biggest trait he has, and a very important, if not the most important one, in startup life, I would say. Quoting again the same author I said before, like Nassim Nicholas Taleb, he has this concept of like, I don't know if he invented it, probably not, but he does refers to it a lot, called anti-fragile. And the way he describes it is, I mean, there's things that succumb under pressure and stress, right? Those are fragile. There are things that don't succumb to pressure and stress, which tend to be robust. But there are things that get better and stronger when they're under pressure, right? And then that's Mateusz. And that's obviously like a fantastic partner to have when you're doing something that's deeply volatile and with very unexpected outcomes. Um, is to have someone that really kind of benefits from there, and then that's also why I decided to kind of team up with him.
Building trust in fintech requires precision, empathy, um, security. How do you balance those priorities inside the team?
Yeah, it's a good question, and obviously prioritization is a big thing when you're especially in an early stage team, right? You have not a lot of resources, so you need to think deeply about how you prioritize your roadmap items, and obviously as well kind of your key tenants. Um, Look, I agree. Those three are really, really important. There's probably a few others that I would mention, but kind of thinking about those three. Um, look, I would put security, but again, maybe coming back to the mathematical formulation, this equation, I would put security as a constraint, in the sense that it's not necessarily the objective function, but it's something that just must exist, right? And the way you think about that is potentially measuring it through key risk indicators and thresholds, which you cannot go below, right? So let's say if someone, I don't know, you have an X amount of support tickets that are rated below 4 or 3 or whatever rating system you might use, you'd get kind of a warning, right? And you need to prioritize that. So security for us is more of a constraint, a very important and strategic constraint, but we see it as a constraint on the objective function. Precision is more of kind of the objective function, right? Having the best, and precision being having the best UX, the most efficient and scalable backend, the best service. Let's put precision as kind of a broad thing. That's what we aim for, right? And we aim to kind of improve that every single day, and it's kind of month on month, week on week, just get better at that while ensuring that security is obviously there. And then empathy, I think it's more cultural, right? I mean, obviously you want to hire people that care. people that have empathy for our customers, but also kind of our partners and all that. And because I don't have more space in my mathematical function, I put that as cultural, I would say. And it's really about hiring the right people, right? If you hire people that care, I don't think you'll need to think a lot about empathy because it's already very much inbuilt within that people.
Tell us one about the tough moment, maybe regarding regulation, product, trust challenge, and how you worked through it.
Yeah. Look, the startup journey is always kind of there's a lot of highs and lows. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think like to pick which maybe rather than speaking about a particular low, I think maybe the one I would pick, and it's not necessarily a low moment. I think is more of kind of a realization I've had and a bit of a challenge that we've managed to go through, and it's one about like mostly like remote working. We've set up Quartz in a fairly remote way. It also came from a lot of like my learnings at Revolut, which is very much a remote first company, and that's just a realization I had there of first how to manage a very high performing team that you might have one member in Brazil, another in India, and another one in London. Um, and then second as well, kind of the benefits that come with that because you're just focusing on hiring the best talent. You're not limited by geography, right? So it's a wonderful thing, which I'm the biggest fan of. But I think there was a realization when we started Quartz, which is we obviously went ahead with that because why wouldn't you? It just worked incredibly well. Um, there was a realization that when you're a small company, when you're just starting out, so there's no product, and also there's nothing to measure, right? Because part of like what allows remote management to work really well is if you can measure things really accurately and you can assign objectives to one person, right? Then you know if you don't need to be day in day out with that person, you just kind of drive through objectives. But when there's nothing to measure, that's really tricky. And I think it was a bit of realization that really kind of starting a startup in a remote environment is just an additional hurdle that you're kind of creating yourself. I mean, it brings the pros that we've been able to hire potentially a lot quicker than if you were constrained geographically. But it brings the cons that because there's no product and there's nothing yet, like it's harder to create a culture. It's harder to kind of get around something. And I think the way we kind of been for that is really trying to be um, kind of very active and kind of very, I mean, thinking actively um, about culture and what are our values, what do we identify with, like which kind of company we want to be, and I mean from day one, which I think not a lot of companies do. We thought about a lot about like what are our cultural values, like do we identify with this, do we don't, and we really drove through that to create this kind of common sense of belonging and to ensuring that we have the right people with us to build the product, right? But it was definitely, again, I wouldn't say it was a low, but it was a challenge and a realization that we came across and that I think we've managed to kind of get through. But yeah, I guess it's probably the one that comes to mind now.
It was something like a challenge in team building, cultural aspects. How do you did you start working? What surprised you about yourself during this phase?
Yeah. Um, Look, I think it was an humbling experience, right? I mean, one comes from, I mean, for myself personally, like you come from obviously like a success story in Revolut is probably in Europe, the biggest startup success story right now. And it's normal, I guess, that you think, okay, I've seen how it works. I can replicate most of it, and I know what good looks like. That it's normal for one to think like that. But it's a humbling journey, starting something from the ground, right? Because you learn that a lot of the things that you took for granted don't work exactly like that, and obviously it's also a very different stage. And so it was about like learning adaptability, um, and also kind of going when to go back for first principles, which I do tend to kind of it's also one of our values to always think for first principles rather than prior experience. And I think within this particular aspect, I might have kind of borrowed a bit from prior experience, whereas maybe thinking for first principles would have helped me a bit more. And so it was a humbling experience there, but I think one that we managed to get through, and then obviously you always kind of get stronger on the other side.
How do you stay grounded and concentrated working at the intersection of finance, data, AI?
Yeah, I mean, independent of whatever areas you might be working in, I think that there's a couple of tenets that help me at least stay grounded. One is like insatiable curiosity, right? I mean, always be learning. I mean, especially if you're working again. I mean, you mentioned kind of data, AI, and finance, and obviously these are areas. I mean, especially generative AI is something that that moves fast. I mean, the pace of discovery and kind of new things coming out. I mean, the pace of the models, like it's crazy. And so you need to learn fast, right? And you need to be a bit of a sponge, kind of absorbing everything and really being at the forefront of what's happening. So that curiosity, it's really important if you want to be building within the space. Um, Second is the driving for first principles, which I was referring to before. Um, like it's important to always kind of, I mean, especially because there's like all these new areas, there's like the huge amount of noise, like in social media, a huge amount of comparison and whatnot, and then really being able to go back to first principles and thinking kind of what makes sense for my particular case, and kind of drive for more kind of scientific problem solving rather than just kind of leaning on past experience or whatever you're hearing on social media. It's really, really important. And then last but not least, which connects to this, just shutting down the noise, right? I think it like all the comparison and potentially being too exposed to all the social media and all the noise like doesn't make I mean, doesn't create a lot of good, I would say. I think it's important that one kind of puts his head down, focus on building the business, focusing on the customers, and kind of giving one step at a time, rather than trying to, yeah, do it the other way around, which at least for me personally doesn't quite work. So that's usually how I tackle these ones.
What early feedback or user stories made you feel this really works?
Yeah, and there's two moments I think since we've started that have been really good. I would say from a product development standpoint. One was the aggregation bit. So our product, again, coming back to the advice piece and how we think about it, you could almost break down the initial version into pillars. One is the aggregation, being able to see everything, which again allows us to know the customer better, because if I take a look at your transactions for the past 5 years, I'll probably learn a lot about you.
Mhm.
So aggregation is important. And it's important that it's really good, and I'll get to that in a minute. And then the second piece is building on that aggregation and that ability to know the person you're speaking with, but also to kind of play back how well or badly are they doing. Is the ability to build upon that to provide advice and course correct and potentially enhance what they're doing. And so I think there's been two moments that I really kind of opened up my eyes for this. One on the aggregation bit, very quickly we've taken out a route that it's quite different from most players that already operate in the space, which is to build the aggregation mechanism in house. Most players work with third party providers and kind of see this as a non core thing for them. We see it as very core again, and it comes back to the point that if I don't know you, I'm not well equipped to provide advice. And so we went down in terms of building all the broker connections almost one by one in house. And I think just seeing how much better they worked in the end and how much better the UX was, because it's just a consistent UX across the board. You don't get redirected to another third party. It's not a broken flow. Um, was really good. And it was kind of, yeah, really reassuring that the bet was playing off. And then I think building on that, I mean, now that we're spending a lot of time kind of training our AI advisory model and kind of thinking through workflows and how that does that interact with the customer. Um, Also seeing kind of how good it is and how much better it is than some of the stuff that's out there, because again, it has access to your data, and it's something that we fully built in house, right? So it's quite able to kind of pick up on your portfolio and a lot of details, which fees you've paid, kind of which FX rate you got. And so because it has better data and it has more visibility, is able to produce a lot better outcomes. And I think it's reassuring to see that as well as we kind of come to our go to market.
If we revisit you in a couple of years, what milestone would make you proudest and why this one?
Yeah. I think it's just seeing that the users are getting value from it, right? And I think in this particular case, that's quite measurable. Right? It's not even a subjective assessment. If you, by using Quartz, are able to get a better return on investment, or are able, on the other hand, to not lose as much money, because eventually you might, but again, which also would always translate to return on investment at the end of the day, right? So again, it's a very really measurable outcome, then it would have been worth it, because in the sense, like, you're getting value from it, like your whole life is probably better off from it. So it would have been worth it. So our ambition is really to get to how many users we can and really provide value, right? And allow them to, one, save or earn kind of more money in terms of building wealth. And then two, as well, which is equally as important, save time, right? Because it's, even for like very financially savvy users, it's a time consuming aspect to manage money, right? That's why this profession of like being a financial advisor or private banker exists. And so this time saving, I think, is equally as important, in the sense that if you're not spending a lot of time doing boring and potentially repetitive tasks and ensuring that you kind of know everything that's happening and you're managing your money efficiently, it's time that you save to focus on whatever you enjoy doing the most, right? And that's also a very good outcome that I would expect us to get and to be able to provide. On a more tactical level, and potentially more within kind of 12 months time, something that we really want to see is, one, that users trust us enough to provide that 100% visibility of the wealth. We want to see people connecting their accounts and want to be able to confidently tell, okay, we see 100% of Anthony's wealth. And then second, that people are engaging with that, right? That's something that you not only, okay, you've aggregated your wealth, but are you getting the value from it? And I think how we can measure that is on the engagement levels of people with the app, right? So that's more kind of the short-term tactical metrics that we're tracking more accurately.
If Quartz succeeds at scale, how will people's relationship with money and wealth management feel different?
Yeah. That's also a good question, one that we think a lot about. There's a lot of fintechs that have like this motto, and I think Revolut even added it once, which is make money work for you, or something around those those lines. And without, running the risk of being repetitive, I think this one in particular, and Quartz in particular, that's the whole mission, right? Is having kind of your money working with you, and almost like, as you focus on your job, on whatever you like doing, and you do better, it kind of earns your income, knowing that that income will translate to wealth and is being well invested, that you're not maybe potentially spending, I don't know, investing on the wrong stuff, or potentially not as optimized as it could be from a tax perspective, and kind of like an ultimate wealth planning perspective, right? I think just having that as a given, that's what having your money working for you, I think, really means to some extent. So even though it has been widely used, and we'll probably go for something different, because if not, we'll just be really repetitive. We'll probably use something different in our advertisement. For me, that's really a summary of how we could change people's relationship with money, right? It's just knowing that it is compounding on the back, and it's building towards their retirement, while they can just focus their time on doing things they enjoy.
Andre, what values guide your decisions as a founder today?
Yeah. I would say that's an easy one, because again, as we discussed previously, we spend a lot of time trying to actively define our values as a company. And I think, as in any early stage company, those values very much reflect what I think are kind of the right values in terms of like building a company. And there are mainly four. Value number one is ownership. Right, being an owner, that's quite self-explanatory, right? It's just really being an owner. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. When you're building a company, it's not a 9 to 5 job in which you're on call. It's just something that you need to really own outcomes, right? And we particularly stress the point about owning outputs rather than inputs. And the difference between that is, owning an input is, for example, if I give you a task, it's completely things by tasks to some extent. While owning an output is actually owning an outcome, right? So if the outcome might be increasing sales by 100, even if you've done a lot of small tasks, if the output was increasing sales by 0, you fail the outcome, right? And that's what ownership means to us, is really measuring things by output. Second is inquiry, and it's really driving for first principles, right? It's not relying a lot on prior experience. It's really problem solving for a scientific lens, which we think is important, because if you want to do things differently, and if you want to disrupt an industry, but if you just tend to do exactly the same as everyone else does, the outcome is going to be the same. Second one is diligence. Actually, third one is diligence, which is more than being an owner, is also like when to know how to balance speed and quality. And diligence is being reliable in terms of speed, but is also being reliable in terms of quality, right? And I feel a lot of professionals, especially when they come from other companies, they tend to see it as a bit of a trade-off, which it might be, and I can understand why. But I mean, at least at this early stage, and when you want to excel at something, it's like running a marathon, right? If you set ourselves, I don't know, like a very high bar in terms of time, it's hard, but you cannot compromise, right? You need to finish the marathon, but you also need to finish the marathon below a certain time, right? And we just need the same way, so we're not willing to kind of give that trade-off. And then fourth is honesty, right? We can only improve if we're willing to share feedback. We can only improve if we're transparent, and if we're honest about what we're doing really well and really badly, right? And that really reflects on the way we do performance management in the company and all that. And again, similar to the cultural values, from very early on, we've been quite intentional on how we thought about performance management and hiring and firing and kind of everything within the company.
You have really worked on this value issue inside the company, and I agree with you. This is very important, especially in the beginning, put the right ground. How has this journey changed the way you think about leadership or success?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I've obviously spoke quite a bit about remote working, so that's definitely been kind of I think as a bit of a changing stance on how I think about that, especially for early stage companies. But then on a positive one, I think, I mean, just the realization that it's incredibly fun and rewarding to be able to kind of pick the group of people you're kind of working with and just getting kind of a energetic and very kind of smart and capable group of individuals together around the problem, and be able to kind of drive them to really kind of first succeed in kind of getting to the to the solution of that problem. We're also enabling them in really kind of getting to their true potential, right? And it's just an incredible position to be on, and one that I think, as I've been going on this journey, which has been short still, but also I've had a bit of that experience as well, kind of managing a very large team at Revolut. It's just an incredible position to be in, when, especially when you see people succeeding and kind of getting better and better. And I think this has been even more exacerbated now that I'm building something from scratch, and I can really pick every single person that it works at Quartz.
Challenging. What's a myth about startups you have discovered isn't true?
Yeah, for me, I mean, you always see on LinkedIn and all social media, there's like it's a very lonely journey. I can totally understand why that would be the case, but I don't think it is if you pick the right co-founder, to be honest. So for me, I mean, it definitely hasn't. I think surrounding yourself with one or more co-founders that you really enjoy working with, and also you really enjoy being with outside of work, because it's also a deeply personal journey, and maybe you finish work and you go off and have dinner or whatnot. It's really important, right? Because the lows are less lows, in the sense that when something goes wrong, you just have a friend to kind of laugh about it and really kind of share things. And there's always two perspectives to one thing, right? So potentially the other person is there to really kind of support. But when you're on a high and things are going really well, it's also really important to have someone to share, right? Because if not, I can really truly relate to the fact that it could be lonely. So for me, I mean, yes, I can understand why people would say it's a very lonely journey, but I think that can be very mitigated by having the right co-founder.
And if your ideal customer, partner, or collaborator is watching right now, what would you tell them?
Yeah, that's simple. Join the waitlist and communicate with us, help us build the product, share ideas, and if they want to go further, they can obviously reach out to me anytime. Mainly through LinkedIn, where I'm more active, but also through X, which I've been getting a bit more into recently.
Looking back so far, what's one thing that makes you proudest as a founder?
Hey, it would definitely be the team, right? I think relates back to what I said before. I just really think we're getting a unique group of individuals together. I think we're setting ourselves on the right path to achieve incredible things. So that's, yeah, that makes me really proud, and it's kind of it's a work that's all continuing, right? Every day you try and improve the bar of the team. So we're really just getting started. But that's definitely the one thing that I would say I'm the proudest when kind of looking back at this past year.
And finally, what keeps you most excited about the future of intelligent, human-centered wealth management?
Yeah. Look, everything, and it really connects with the vision that I was saying, right, about kind of having your money working for you. I can very clearly imagine a future where that would happen, right? And that would be almost kind of a given that things work and are efficient, and it's not as much as a concern, but it's something that we just kind of see as a benefit that we have in terms of the money compounding in the back and all that, right? So that vision, and also the endless possibilities that kind of go a long way with it, is something that really excites me. On a more tactical level, I guess that there's a lot of things that I think could be done the next 12 to 24 months that are really interesting. One is access to private markets. Like, I think a big trend that we see is a lot of the returns that could be realized before on public markets are now moving towards private markets, right? Because companies are just taking longer to IPO. I mean, case in point being Stripe or Revolut as well. And so there's a renewed interest for private markets, but more than renewed interest, I mean, for people to be able to realize the returns they realized before, they need to get access to these kind of late stage private market companies and potentially even earlier stage, right? And it goes back to that kind of fairness of opportunities that I'm passionate about. So private market is definitely one. But there's also very different things that we discuss on a day-to-day basis. For example, Lombard lending, so the ability to lend against your assets, which I think would be an incredibly interesting product as well. So yeah, I mean, that could be speaking about it for the next hours, but there's just like a whole lot of products that we're excited, and I guess it needs to be that way, right? We wouldn't be the right team to be addressing this product if we thought we're kind of done already. So yeah, we see a very long way ahead.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Andre. Thanks for being with us today, for being so insightful and sharing so many experiences. And I wish you the best.
Thank you very much, Antonis. It was my pleasure, and thanks for the invite.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.